Welcome to this week's Best New Releases. Today we are bringing you our first interview with the publishing professionals that work to bring our brilliant new releases to the bookshelves. Elinor Fewster is a freelance publicist with over 15 years' experience in PR and communications. She has worked with leading publishers including HarperCollins, Penguin Random House, Simon & Schuster, Pan Macmillan and Bonnier Books on a wide variety of fiction and non-fiction campaigns. Over the years, she has supported authors ranging from debut novelists to established bestsellers to pop divas and Olympians. She recently worked with me on the release of The Last Weekend, and it was such an enjoyable experience that I felt compelled to ask her to share some of her experience with some of the authors and readers out there that might find it either helpful or interesting. Welcome, Elinor.
Thank you for having me. I'm honoured.
So, my first question to you is about that list of people you've worked with. Do I come under the category pop diva or Olympian?
Absolutely.
Both of them. First question to you is a question I think every debut author is a bit afraid to ask when they first get their contract, which is what is the difference between publicity and marketing?
Yes, that's a common one, and yeah, obviously when you're close to it and you're in the industry, it's but from the outside, I can see why that's not always clear. So my way of kind of explaining it is that publicity is generally earned, so we don't pay for coverage. So we're looking for reviews, features, interviews, broadcast interviews, and print events, festivals, things like that. But all of those are purely kind of achieved through pitching and relationships with journalists. Whereas marketing is normally more has more spend behind it. So if it's adverts that you might see, I don't know, in railway stations or in weekend supplements or on Amazon, or if it's a partnership paid for with a brand or an influencer or a newsletter, that falls under marketing.
And obviously, everybody works very collaboratively in publishing. So can you just tell us a little bit about the process and your part in that process?
So if I'm in house, generally what happens is there's an acquisition meeting every week where people from every department, kind of from marketing to publicity to sales to editorial, discuss books that have been put forward by agents and kind of decide, how we would approach publication of that book and whether we would want to take it forward. I might say, from a publicity perspective, what I think we could realistically achieve in terms of coverage. And that depends on a whole variety of things, from the profile of the author to the kind of subject matter to whether it's kind of a particularly trendy kind of area of publishing at the time. There's so many different things. And obviously, sales will have their thoughts about what slots they might be able to achieve, marketing in terms of what budget they might be able to put behind things. So there's a whole kind of alchemy of things which goes into deciding that. And then once a book has been acquired, then that's kind of the time. Sometimes we would meet the author in the acquisition process to pitch to see if there's lots of different publishers who who are bidding for that book, we might meet the author then to pitch. But once the book has been bought, that's kind of I'll often have read the book before it's been bought, just it through that acquisition process. But then that's kind of when the publicity campaign really starts. I start to think about it. Often books can be 18 months out before they're actually published from acquisition. But start to put together plans and think about how we build a buzz and reach readers and audiences. Yeah.
Point at which the book is acquired, if there is a lead into publication of 2 years, at what stage would you meet the author? And to what extent is the author then involved between then and the publication of the book?
Mm. Yeah, maybe 2 years is extreme, but I mean, it's definitely 18 months, depending on the scheduling. And I would normally meet the author probably 6 to 12 months out, to kind of, slightly depending, but to kind of discuss how we're going to approach the publicity campaign, what they feel comfortable doing, or what their ambitions are. You know, managing expectations so that we're both on the same page about what we can realistically achieve. Some people hate public speaking and don't want to do events, for example. Some people don't want to talk about personal stories, which is totally fair enough. Some people have got lots of broadcast experience or have connections with various people, or so there's all kinds of things that are really useful for me to know in that early stage so I can shape the kind of publicity campaign accordingly.
And at that stage, at the beginning of the campaign, talk us through a sort of typical day at the office. So, what are the kind of initial calls you might start making?
Yeah, so again, it's quite a collaborative process. So speaking with marketing colleagues and knowing what their plans are is always really useful. And then essentially thinking about what the audience for that book is, what publications, if we're thinking of print, online channels, broadcast, like where are the readers, who are the readers that we want to reach, really drilling down on where we're going to focus our energy. Um, and think about what we're going to achieve, and is that getting proofs in, and putting them in the hands of, I don't know, glossy sort of women's magazine reviewers, that they work several months in advance. 6 months out is a good time. We'll quite often meet for coffees and talk about what we've got coming up and what's exciting us. So it's never too early to start kind of building a buzz and saying what you're excited about. Yeah, it's reaching out to journalists and saying, what things are you looking for over the next few months? Are there any particular themes, or if it's a feature, or sort of seasonal things coming up, and how we can kind of work that book and that author into those.
Can you just talk us through what makes a really effective pitch and the way you approach presenting that to journalists?
Yeah, I think it can be like, you write your amazing book, and then there's this whole kind of other world of processes and things that are expected of authors. Not expected, but can help to launch a book. Um, and every author is different and has different things that they want to achieve or hope to achieve. But in terms of kind of pitches, yeah, you're right. It's about sort of finding something that you're comfortable talking about that is slightly sort of part of the cultural agenda, perhaps, or something. Did you watch The Summer I Turned Pretty? I am currently watching it. Don't quite know why, but anyway, apparently millennial women are obsessed with it. And do you have a kind of hot take on that? Or is it something? Is it something more personal that you've been through, a relationship or friendships? That we talked a lot about those because they related to your book, and so how you can kind of link what you're saying back to the story that you're telling in your book as well. And it might be that you write a piece, yeah, about a theme in your book, but it becomes more relevant, especially to a journalist, I think, if it's relating to your kind of personal experiences as well. That's not to say that you have to mine your personal experiences and talk about, lots of people don't want to do that. The magazines, women's magazines, do love a personal first person piece. That's true, but there are many other kind of opportunities to do something light-hearted. Are you looking forward to autumn and you love pumpkin spice lattes and you're not going to apologize for it? I don't know. Just so many kind of different angles and ways that we can be creative. And also, I think what I would always recommend to authors is to follow the news agenda, think about things that people are talking about. Not necessarily heavy news, but there's so many things that come up. I think GQ did a list recently about what it means to be British, and then there were so many kind of side articles that came off the back of that, for example. So there's lots of kind of ways that you can engage with the media, without having to talk about something deeply personal that you just don't want to.
Yeah, there was a very interesting article recently by an author who said, I don't understand why it is female authors are required to, mine their trauma to publicize
Mm.
their books. And I found it a very interesting article because I hadn't even questioned it in many ways. I had considered it as a kind of prerequisite. Do you think it's more likely that that the press are going to kind of pick up on your story if what you're doing is bringing something uniquely personal? Because it's a very powerful thing, isn't it, to talk about a
I think
personal
it is.
experience?
Yeah, and it's a real way of connecting with readers because people, when they hear personal stories and hear about something that they can relate to or have empathy for, etc., um, then it is a really powerful way of connecting with readers. If you listen to Woman's Hour, the authors that tend to go on there, unless they've got a particularly high profile, are talking about personal experiences. Um, so, so I think it's important to find a way to connect with readers, and that might not be through, talking about the breakdown of a relationship, or I don't know, or
Mm,
um, but it might be about finding a different way. I had an author, for example, who wrote a piece for Sunday Times Style about um, how swimming had helped her recover um, from a some ill health that she'd had, and she again went on Women's Hour and kind of spoke about that as well. So there's different ways of approaching things without, yeah, having to mine your trauma, so
yeah.
to put it. And I do understand, yeah, how people can take exception to that because it is, it shouldn't be a prerequisite if that's what you have to do to promote your book, for sure.
I think for me, it comes under that category of once you've written your book in the, solace of a room and you come into the outside world and
Mm,
you're working with people to publish it, then you are exposing yourself to different ways of writing. So, of course, one of
yeah.
those is pitch writing. One of those is suddenly starting to discover whether what you want to do is talk about personal stories when what you've been doing is writing fiction. So I
Mm,
think it's a really, I think you have to be a bit plastic in the way that you approach different types of writing. Like by their very nature, lots of authors are quite hermetic and quite introverted. So if an author comes to you and says, I just don't want to be sitting on stage, I don't want to be talking publicly, I don't want to be doing any radio coverage, what do you
mm.
encourage them to do to participate in the business of publicity? And
Yeah, so I think it's totally fair enough, and also, I mean, it's completely understandable that, yeah, you're alone a lot of the time writing your book, and then suddenly, I've seen authors kind of thrust onto a stage and just have, I mean, it's my worst nightmare. I have had to do it a few times. So there is no assumption that people are natural at it or good at it. What we can do is provide some sort of coaching and media training if people
mm,
want to explore that and get better at it, or or more comfortable with it is probably a better way to say it. But also we could just look at other ways of publicising the book that don't involve public speaking or chatting on the radio. Be that written features, be that Substacks, be that you know, yeah, a myriad of other things, kind of
mm,
that
mm.
review coverage, and kind of focus more on those other avenues which don't, because I've seen authors that aren't don't really want to do a panel or and agree to it because they think they have to, and it's deeply uncomfortable for them, and it doesn't serve the audience either if someone's not enjoying it. So I do think, um, also, I think my recommendation often is to watch other panels and watch other authors speaking and see, sort of get comfortable with how it works and how it looks, and then I think you have a better idea of whether it's something that you would remotely be, up for doing at some point down the line or not.
It's also, I do think it's one of those really interesting parts of the process where, as an author, you can, if you step into an area that you haven't been involved in before, you can discover that you quite enjoy
Yeah.
doing it. You may have made an assumption of introversion your whole life and then step on stage
Mm.
and think, ta-da, I'm here.
And that's
It's
it.
quite, it's a really
And
interesting part of
also,
the process.
Yeah, and also it's not, it's not saying, oh, you're going in front of an audience of 500 people. You could have an intimate bookshop event with 15 to 20 people. There's so many different sort of ways that events look as well. So I think, yeah, there's there's many different ways to kind of, yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned bookshops because again, the other one of the wonderful things I think about the publicity process is creating that umbilical cord with the readers as well, isn't it? That of course there's
Mm,
lots of stuff that goes on online, and you can do that as an author on Instagram and
yeah,
Facebook and Twitter, and you can communicate with your readers that way. But if you are doing a panel or you're sitting in a bookshop and somebody comes up to you and chats and says, either I've just read your book or I really think this is going to appeal because
yeah,
I've just been through X, Y, and Z. It's a wonderful thing as an author to sit and have those conversations with your readers. And I don't know any author who doesn't enjoy that communication with
yeah.
readers.
And I think that's so rewarding because you can be sat in a radio studio or you can write a piece for Guardian Weekend, I don't know. But you don't really know what the response is to that beyond
Yeah.
maybe you'll see some things on Twitter or whatever. But to actually sort of see the readers engaging, and yeah, being able to talk to you and interact is, I think, is one of the yeah most enjoyable parts of the process for lots of
Mm,
authors.
mm.
Um,
I just
yeah,
wanted to talk to you about journalism because obviously the face of journalism has changed really radically in the last 5 to 10
yeah,
years. And there's, as far as I understand it, less column inches for print journalism, and
yeah.
you have there's a lot of grappling for space. So, just what do you observe about that changing face of journalism and how you publicize your authors within that?
Yeah, I think yeah, since I started out, which was, I mean, I literally had a Rolodex when I started. It has it's changed. There's just not as much space. It's much rarer now, sadly, for authors to get paid to write features. Often the kind of trade-off is that, we'll publish your piece if you write it for free, and that has changed. The authors used to get paid for pieces, so that's different. Also, there's much less review space across broadsheets and tabloids than there used to be, and the kind of review coverage definitely sways to non-fiction over fiction. So it is, yeah, it's not guaranteed that the review coverage just happens, unfortunately. And so there are lots of other kind of different platforms that we explore. Podcasts were never a thing when I started out, and now they're huge, and they're a really great long form kind of way of connecting with readers, um, and sharing views and reviewing books and talking passionately about books, which maybe you wouldn't come across in a 200-word review, for example. So there's an online channels. I mean, TikTok is obviously huge. I'm far too old to understand it, although I do try. Um, but yeah, I suppose in a way, word of mouth is actually, funnily enough, I think more of a thing now than it was maybe when I started out, because people are sharing their recommendations and their kind of thoughts on books. There's so many more mediums to do that online than there were, where it used to be super traditional, like you got your review in a national newspaper, you might get into a glossy magazine if you're lucky. um there might be a radio interview, but there's so much more that you can kind of explore now with podcasts, with Substack, um with even with events and book clubs and book groups and online events. There's so many more kind of opportunities, which is great because as you say, with shrinking column inches, it's hard to go to get a good amount of coverage in those traditional print media spaces.
So lots of
Yeah,
authors are going to come into this situation publicising their book with you in completely different situations, aren't they? Some will have written, as you say, they'll either have a profile, whether
Yeah.
that's an Olympian or a pop star, or they won't have a profile and they may be writing fiction. And within that
Mm.
kind of subcategory, that could be romance or thriller or crime. Some people will have
Yeah.
paperback deals and some people will have hardback, then paperback deals. So you've got
Yeah.
lots of different platforms upon which you could or could not have leverage and or be successful. So where we know that nonfiction does very well, which is really interesting in and of itself, what are the kind of subcategories in fiction that you think do well?
Yeah, so interestingly, I mean, saying that, yeah, fiction, non-fiction gets more review coverage, but actually the fiction market as a whole is kind of booming at the moment. And I think um, there's there's a school of thought that in particularly sort of tumultuous times, globally, politically, people turn to fiction, of course, for kind of comfort and a bit of relief. Um, and in terms of genres, I suppose the crime thriller genre has kind of quite specific um, specific channels that you can publicize through, or for example, the Mail and the Tide. Well, actually, lots of uh, broad national broadsheets and tabloids will have a monthly kind of roundup review slot for crime and thriller. And there's genre kind of podcasts and online sites and quite a sort of big crime thriller fan community. So in terms of publicizing within that genre kind of group, it's relatively straightforward. Or although again, it's a very crowded market, and um, it's never guaranteed. Or yeah, it's not to say it's easy, but there are kind of specific channels for fans of crime thrillers. Um, the media can be quite snobby about romance and romanticity, which is obviously quite a big thing right now. Although the Times, for example, now do a sort of contemporary fiction roundup every month, so which is a relatively new thing. Um, Literary fiction tends to get reviewed more in the broadsheets, um, which has always been the case as long as I
Mm,
can remember, really.
mm,
So there's nothing can't that is beyond kind of, but I think, yeah, commercial fiction is probably, well, it's such a big category um, that it's harder to achieve that review coverage in my
mm,
experience.
mm.
Um,
And
just
then, of
because there's a
course,
lot of books out there, and um,
yeah, of course, of course. And then, of course, today, for example, the new series of Slow Horses drops
mm,
on Apple, doesn't it? So you get these with film and television adaptations, you get these endless kind of great refreshers then of the book coverage, don't you? And you get reviews with Mick
yeah,
Herron and you get all of that stuff,
yeah. I
which
mean, a
is
TV
obviously,
series is a kind of dream
mm,
publicity opportunity because obviously it brings a whole new kind of readership um, to the books. Yeah.
yeah, of course. Um, so I just some general questions to end because I'm aware we're running out of time.
Okay.
Are there so lots of authors obviously come to you guys with different, having gone through different jobs and careers, and I just wondered, are there jobs that are useful when it comes to communicating with an author? If they've had previous experience, I don't know, packaging up ideas or again, previous jobs can be about different experiences, can't they? And lending different stories to the press about the time you worked
Yeah,
on a pig farm, for example. So,
exactly. I think, yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't think there's any kind of, yeah, there's no kind of previous life experience that's not useful, I suppose. If someone was a journalist before, like fabulous, you see, I don't know, see Elizabeth Day at the moment promoting her new book, and she's incredibly well connected and like good for her, and great for her publicist. But um, I think there's a big conversation at the moment in the media about the job market and redundancy, and maybe if someone's been through that, that's something that you could speak to in a kind of in
Mm,
a feature context.
mm.
Um, so I don't think there's no sort of life experience or job that means that you would be a easier to publicize or not. So I think yeah.
And what advice would you give a debut author who is about to start publicising their book? How can they prepare and what should they be doing during the process to help the situation?
Mm. So I think one of my one piece of advice which probably I would never take myself, but is probably a useful one to bear in mind is just not to try not to compare yourself to other
Mm,
authors and other campaigns and books. And because I think you can get yourself tied in knots thinking about what other people are doing or what you should be doing. And I think the key is to sort of remain authentic, um, really focused on your book and the story that you want to tell. Also, I would read, I would engage with media channels, online, print, and really understand. The more you read them, the more you understand what they're looking for and kind of the vibe that they have, I suppose. So yeah, I would just kind of consume as much media as you can, connect with other authors. I think that's always can be quite a nice thing to do. Some would perhaps not agree. But yeah, sort of trying to feel part of that writing community. No question is a stupid question when you're a debut. Like, I think sometimes, in publishing houses, terribly busy. And so you forget that this is a whole new world for, you've written a book and how could you possibly know all of these um, terms that we use for sales or marketing and ads and whatever. So I just think, yeah, don't be afraid to ask questions, and yeah, don't compare yourself to other people.
And do you think any authors nowadays can get away with not being on social media? Because I know lots of authors find it such a distraction to their writing day, and it's so impossible not to jump on and check, what's going
Yeah,
on.
I think oh gosh. I think you absolutely can not be on social media, but um yeah, it's maybe you can sort of regulate it to only go on once a day or something.
Mm,
I think lots of people have turned away from X in recent times for obvious reasons. But things like Instagram are a really good way of connecting with readers, and kind of, yeah, there's so much book content there these days. But I don't think it's essential. And if it's something you would just don't want to do, maybe you could write about why you don't want to do it. Like
yeah.
there's
Mm.
maybe a feature in that. But I don't think and you should never feel pressured to do something that you don't want to do because then it won't be authentic and it won't be and no one needs to, it's stressful enough kind of bringing a book out into the world without having to worry about reels or I don't know, Insta lives and things that I'm not very good at.
I think it's I think what you say about connecting with other authors is a really great point. I think that is, to go out and read other books that are coming out or that have just come out and to be
Yeah,
supporting each other. You start to, I think, having gone from a very, again, lonely time, probably writing your book in a room on your own, using social media to its greatest advantage, which almost in a way is to do that because you can get all the information. Most authors are
yeah,
on social media, whether they like it or not. So you sort of know what's
yeah,
going on. You can often get hold of a digital copy and just say, I really like the sound of it. Can I read it? And then
yeah,
you sort of make, you make new friends, you make your water cooler, colleagues
yeah.
like that. You make your little digital community.
Really, it's such a kind of generous and inclusive
Mm,
and like nice community. Um, it's so worth, yeah. And I've seen, lots of so many of the authors I've worked with have really lovely relationships with lots of other authors because you're going through the same kind of things. And
yeah.
um, I do think it's I do think it's a really great thing to do.
That's right. Elinor, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking time out of your very busy day to come and chat. And good luck with the next book.
Thank you. Same to you.